Hi, this is Sydney Anderson. I'm the host of Behind the Podcast. You can find that on SoundCloud or linked on WordPress. I will put links in the description box. So I just thought, in case there's any other aspiring podcasters on YouTube or people who are just getting started, I was going to do just a fun little video about the 8 things that happen when you decide to start doing a podcast. Number one, you're actually going to probably have too many ideas when you start out if you're anything like me. Like you decide that you're going to do a podcast and you're like, yay, I'm finally going to do it. Finally going to just put myself out there. And then all of your interests are just going to open up, like potential topics. And it's going to be really difficult to pick if you're anything like me. So, what actually happened with me was that none of my original ideas for a podcast actually ended up working. So, I feel like everyone kind of ends up doing the podcast that they're meant to do, like anything else. So that's how that ends up working out, or how it ended up working out in my case. Number two, you realize that some of your original ideas just aren't going to work, and that can feel really disheartening. But as with anything, when you're creating something, there's just something you're doing that's not gonna work. Like if you're a beginner, like I am, especially. So what happened to me was I wanted to do a podcast on music, and I was just running into issues with licensing and fair use, and it was just a matter of time and resources that I just didn't have. But it seems like setbacks are honestly inevitable as a beginner getting into this. So it's just kind of part of the developing process of any new podcaster, I think. Number three, based on those setbacks and just being in that situation, you're probably going to come up with new ideas that you may not have ever thought of before. And again, I think that's part of any creative process. While you're working on it, you just have ideas that you just didn't even know you were going to have starting out. And what happened with me was I'm thinking, wow, I am in way over my head here. So then I thought, why not do a podcast based on interviewing the people that already have podcasts? Because they're probably, other people like me who just want to break in, but just have a lot to learn. So I think the setbacks helped bring me to that point. So that's how that ended up working out. Number four, you realize that other people have already done your ideas. I mean, in my case, of course, other people have podcasts talking about other podcasts or podcasting, and that's going to be with any topic that you have. There's just so much out there. Of course, you're going to be kind of bumping up against another podcast or two as far as theme. But the way I look at it is a theme for a podcast, it could almost be looked at as like a genre of movie. And I talk about this in my blog post. Like, there's more than one romantic comedy in the world, guys, and that's okay. I don't personally like romantic comedies, but I know a lot of people do. So it's really okay that we have more than one. And, maybe sometimes like the director or the actors are going to bring their own originality to it and make it different from all the other romantic comedies out there. And as a podcaster getting started, it was really helpful for me to just have that in my mind. So even if there are other podcasts that are a little bit similar to yours, I don't think that's any reason to worry because you probably have interesting stuff to say. Number five, you're almost inevitably going to start to compare your work to not only to other people's work, but probably just some of the forerunning podcasts out there. Maybe podcasts connected to NPR, just the big dogs, basically. I think that's natural. Like anything we're doing, we're going to want to compare it to not only what other people are doing, but just the best of the best. And I think especially as a beginner, that can almost like encourage you to just not even try, which is not good. So there is a book, which I'm going to talk about in the description. Not only, it's like a technical guide to podcasting, it's a little bit dated, but one of the things I really liked about it was that they talked about how one of the great things about podcasting is that it's something that anyone can do. So I definitely think that there is not a limit on the amount of voices that we can have in podcasting, and I definitely think that whatever the people who've been in this for years are doing, that shouldn't make you want to stop trying yourself. Number six, you struggle with the tech. Wow. as a beginner, like, not even just the process of editing, which is going to be long and slow no matter what. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. There's so much that I just didn't consider, like, making the cover art and not using any copyrighted material when making the cover art and hosting and yeah, just give yourself a lot of time to work. That's probably the only piece of practical advice I'm actually giving in this video. Give yourself time and don't give up. Number 7, you realize that, yeah, people are actually listening. Um, I got a tiny, tiny response to the first episode of my podcast, and that was enough for me for 2 reasons. First, because it was kind of what I expected to get for a first episode, and second, because the idea that even if there are just a couple people listening, that's awesome. I mean, these are people who actually want to hear what I have to say. That feels really, really good. So I feel like when you get that as a beginner, it's enough to make you want to keep going, or at least it was for me. And 8th, just the realization that, you got to do it all again if you want to keep going. And again, the struggle with tech, like, I know that I am not perfect at editing yet. That is probably going to take a while. But, every time I do it, I'm going to get a little bit better. And also the knowledge that, yeah, there are people out there who want to hear this is going to help. And it's going to help for the second episode. And yeah. So I think the lesson that we have here is just don't give up. Okay, and that was the 8 things that happen when you decide to do a podcast. Thanks for watching this first little podcaster vlog, I guess you could call it. And let me know in the comments if you're just starting with a podcast or if you've had one for a while, whether or not this matched up with your experiences. I mean, while I'm sure that, I hope that something I said, relates to something someone else has gone through, I highly doubt that anyone out there is gonna agree with every item on my list either, and that's cool. We all have a whole bunch of different experiences, and we can help each other. I'm also at boldlypodcasting.wordpress.com. That's where I post my podcast, which is Behind the Podcast on SoundCloud. And I'm also on Twitter at Sydney On Air. And like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thanks. Bye.